Welcome to the Polygamer Podcast, where gaming is for everyone. Join us as we expand the boundaries of the gaming community.
Hello and welcome to the Polygamer Podcast, episode number 75 for Wednesday, March 21st, 2018. I'm your host, Ken Gagney, returning after a brief hiatus. I apologize for having missed the February show, but I recently started a new day job, which I'm sure you don't want to hear about. Suffice to say that it's been a little overwhelming and I fell a bit behind. But now I'm eager to get back on track, and joining me today is an alumnus of this very podcast, Mr. Matt Baum. Hello, Matt.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming back on the show. It's always a pleasure to chat with you.
Oh, the pleasure's all mine.
Aw, you're too kind. Well, last time you were on the show, you were here to chat about your documentary, Playing with Pride, and we may catch up on that later, but today you're here to talk about your new adventure, The Queens of Adventure. What is The Queens of Adventure?
Yeah, so Queens of Adventure is a podcast that we're starting up. It's real drag queens playing a real game of D&D. It's super exciting. We're basically blending everything that people love about big, huge, over-the-top drag shows and thrilling, exciting, epic fantasy D&D adventures, and bringing them all together into one big show. We've got an amazing cast of some drag queens here in our hometown of Seattle who've been doing live shows where they play D&D, and now we're branching out and putting it out onto the internet as a podcast that anyone can listen to.
Awesome. I have so many questions about the drag scene, about your podcast, your show. Let's also get up front the fact that you are currently on Kickstarter for this project, and is, in the interest of full disclosure, a Kickstarter that I've backed.
Well, thank you.
You're quite welcome. I wish I could give more, as always. But tell me about the Kickstarter. What is it that you need the Kickstarter to accomplish?
Yeah, so we're big believers in supporting queer artists, and so we set up the Kickstarter so that we can make sure that the party doesn't die of exposure, so that they that everyone who's involved creatively in this is getting paid. So we've got our 4 performers. They're Arson Nikki, Freya Love, Harlot Oscara, Butalino Kipple. They're longtime drag artists here in Seattle. They've been doing a lot of queer community and queer art for years and years and years. At various shows. And then we've also got artist Chad Sell doing some art for the podcast to go along with it. He's also designed just a gorgeous postcard for the show. It's printed on foil, and backers of the Kickstarter are able to get that of this very epic drag queen, with the rays of power emanating from her. So we want to make sure that artists involved in the show are getting paid, and we've also got a musician who want to make sure that he gets paid to compose music for the show. That was the reason for doing the Kickstarter. We're also reaching towards some stretch goals now of live streaming some of the adventures. So we'll have live streams up of the queens playing live and interacting with an audience. We've hit 3 of those stretch goals so far, and we're moving along towards being able to have a theme song done for the show, being able to pay for that. And then if we can make it to our top stretch goal, we want to have a fully illustrated module, an adventure that people can download and play. That's part of the whole Queens of Adventure universe.
Now, I would say that those goals might be ambitious, but you hit your crowdfunding goal pretty quickly after launching this Kickstarter.
Yes, indeed. We're really excited. And, there's a part of me that's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this, that there's this appetite for it. And then there's this other part that's like, well, yes, this isn't a total surprise, because we've been doing a live show here in Seattle that we called Dungeons and Drag Queens, where similarly we have our 4 drag queens playing a D&D adventure for a live audience. And those shows always sold out every time. So there's definitely demand for something like this, something that combines the queer culture of drag shows and the imagination and fantasy of D&D. So putting it out onto the internet, it's been a relief and a surprise, but not a complete surprise that people are willing to back the Kickstarter. So we're super excited that we're able to hit that funding goal and reach for some exciting stretch goals.
Now help me understand, how surprising was this? Was this your first Kickstarter campaign?
Yeah, very first Kickstarter campaign.
Wow, so you didn't have like this long history of crowdfunding techniques and practices that you knew would be successful and that you applied. You were just kind of hoping for the best.
We're learning as we go. That having been said, I do have, for some of my other work, as supported on Patreon. So I've got a podcast called Sewers of Paris, where I talk to gay men about entertainment that's changed their lives. And so that's been supported on Patreon. I also do some YouTube videos. I have a series called Culture Cruise, where I talk about queer content on TV and in movies and books. And I have Patreon supporters who keep that going. But that's more of an ongoing type basis. And this is the first time we've kickstarted a project. And certainly the first time we've kickstarted something that involves, other people, besides just me. It's one thing to have a Patreon for my podcast and my YouTube videos. But doing something this big and this ambitious with so many different creative people is, it's definitely the biggest undertaking, I've done so far.
Oh, that's super exciting. And you mentioned the Sewers of Paris. You are, of course, an accomplished podcaster in your own right. Will you be able to repurpose any of the equipment for this new project?
Well, that's one of the other things that we're kickstarting for is, I've got some equipment and software that I use to edit, that podcast, but recording, 5 to 6 people around a table is going to be a little bit different. We've done some test sessions where we get, all the drag queens together. And something that we've discovered is that just having 1 or 2 mics is totally insufficient. Feeding everything all together into, one track it's not really going to work for editing like a big group podcast. It turns out that when you get drag queens together to play D&D, there's a lot of laughing and shrieking and muttering under the breath and, sort of cutting remarks muttered to the side. So we need some more sophisticated audio equipment in order to record everybody and have it be a pleasant experience, for the listener. So that's where some of the other Kickstarter money's going. We're, getting, microphones and, recording, a little box to record everything onto. And then just basic stuff we got to make sure we've got enough cables to feed everybody's mic into one machine. So it's, we're basically creating, my partner James and I are doing this together. We're sort of creating a, recording studio in our apartment, for this show.
And you can fit all your entire cast in your apartment?
Yeah, just barely. We were able to get them all together a few weeks ago. Everybody in full drag, sitting around a table. If you go to the Kickstarter, it's at queensofadventure.com. You can see, the video that we, shot with them. You can see some footage of them sitting around the table and rolling the dice and, consulting their character sheets. And, everybody's got a glass of wine in front of them because it's kind of important when you get drag queens together to make sure that, you got that flowing. But yeah, you can, we kind of crammed him in, but we've got him there, wigs and all.
That does sound like fun. So that's the Kickstarter portion of our episode. Let's talk about the actual show that you are kickstarting, which is, as you said, a bunch of drag queens playing Dungeons and Dragons or other RPGs. As I warned you before the show, drag is an aspect of diversity that I know very little about. So not only for my benefit, but also possibly for our listeners. Can you give me sort of a drag 101?
Yeah, sure. So, something that I think might be a little prohibitive or, I don't know, intimidating for people when they come to drag is that there's a lot of references and it seems like there's a lot of rules and there's a certain way of talking and there's a certain history to it all. But it's actually, that's one of the things that drag has in common with D&D, that there's a lot of lore and backstory and just accepted ways of going about playing. But ultimately what it comes down to is if it's fun, you're doing it right. Whether it's D&D or whether it's drag, the same holds true. So, I guess a 101 on drag is basically, what you need to know is that, drag is a way of exploring / celebrating, gender and, taking a look at the rules of how do we dress ourselves up as a man? How do we dress ourselves up as a woman? And say, okay, well, those are the rules, but what if we broke some of them? And so it's, sort of a form of, I don't know, it's maybe a little too highfalutin to say that it's like social hacking, but it's, a way of, changing your presentation and, experimenting with the way that you put yourself out into the world. RuPaul has this saying where, she says, we're all born naked and the rest is drag. And I think that's really true. It's the way that you, dress yourself up and present yourself. We're all wearing a costume, at any point during the day. And so what most people think of when they think of drag, when you think of a drag show or going to a bar or watching Drag Race, is something that is extremely heightened and over the top and larger than life, which is something that, that's one of the things that makes drag very, very fun. It's not just like, how can I put on, can I put on a wig and look like, just an average woman? It's, can I put on the largest wig I can find and the sparkliest dress that's ever been made and the most ostentatious necklace, and really heighten, the sort of codes that we use to signify, gender. And that's sort of, I think that's what people find when they go to drag. That's what people are looking for. And that's the fun of it, is really getting big and extreme and goofy and over the top and having a good time.
So can anybody of any gender identity, expression, or sexual orientation engage in drag?
That's something that everybody has a different answer to. And we've been very deliberate and very clear with our show that we have set this in a very inclusive fantasy world, where the power of drag is available to anybody who wants to unleash a hero within. We're celebrating all genders, all orientations, all people who want to come to drag are welcome. It's something that I believe very strongly is that, why would we turn someone away from this super fun, art form? It's absolutely open to everyone.
If I may ask, do you yourself engage in drag?
Well, it depends on your definition. So RuPaul saying about it, everything is drag as long as you're not naked. So, when I just go out of the house, on any day, wear my clothes, you could make the case that that's drag. That having been said, the thing that people normally think of when they think of drag, of like the big hair and the wild makeup and the huge sparkly dresses, that's not something that I've given a shot to. That's not something I've given a chance, but, I think like a lot of folks, I've got sort of percolating inside of me, a drag queen that is waiting to come out. So, it's only a matter of time. Doing the show is the first time it's the most that I've ever been involved in a drag show. I've been involved in drag shows in the past as a photographer and sort of behind the scenes. But this is the first time I'm actually, putting myself out there. I'm the dungeon master for all of the games, but, I'm not doing it in drag yet. We'll see. We'll see where that goes.
I apologize. I just realized after asking that question that most drag queens operate under a pseudonym, and I was basically asking you to out yourself. I apologize.
Oh, no, that's fine. It's one of the other things, not that RuPaul is the person, the ultimate authority on drag, but something else that RuPaul has said about drag is that drag never takes itself too seriously. And, that's an approach that we're certainly trying to adopt with the show, is that this is something that we're doing for fun. It's something that we're doing to have a good time and to laugh and joke around. It's not something that we are getting too theoretical or rulesy about. And the same way, like D&D, our approach to that is it's something that we're doing for fun. It's an exploration. It's an adventure. It's a fun, goofy time, and we're joking around. Ultimately we're here to enjoy ourselves and, have a good time with friends.
So why did you choose to combine Dungeons and Dragons specifically with drag? Why not the LGBT community, sort of like you did with your Playing with Pride documentary?
It's funny actually, because it all started with just the name. For literally years, my partner James and I have just been kind of joking around about the name Dungeons and Drag Queens and saying, oh, wouldn't it be funny to have a show called Dungeons and Drag Queens where drag queens play D&D? And then, we got to a point, this past summer where we've been talking about it for so long, we were like, well, let's just do it. The next thing we know, I'm up on stage DMing. But I will say, it was a huge experiment. We did our first show in August, around, PAX with Penny Arcade, here in Seattle. I had never, DM'd before. I had never played D&D up until a few weeks before the show. We knew that it was going to be a great way to, engage with drag queens and to tell a story. James, my partner, is a experienced game designer, and this is a world that he knows very much. And so working together, we designed the adventure for them. And he taught me how to play D&D, and he taught me how to DM. So I came into it thinking, there was a long period where I was like, this is too complicated. This is too hard. Role-playing games there's too many numbers and too many rules. I'm never going to get it. But then he just kept, showing me the manuals and walking me through it. And I'm like, oh, I get it. It's just you're telling a story and sometimes you roll some dice. And that's what got us there. And as far as like combining D&D with drag, what we found is that those two things go together really, really well, unexpectedly so. A lot of our drag queens, a lot of our performers had the same approach that I did, the same hesitation of like, oh, well, this is something that's very technical and I don't know how to do this and it's not for me. And then as soon as they started playing, they realized, oh, wait, I've been doing this all along. Drag is all about creating a persona for yourself and this extensive backstory and bringing your skills to the stage and also, your liabilities, the things that you're not so good at, but being lifted up by your fellow performers. And it's so similar to D&D where you create a character and you unleash this hero that's waiting within this. You tap into your inner bravery to go on an adventure. And you're there with the party and everyone's working together. It's just remarkable how well D&D and drag fit together to, the way that we describe it is whether you might be slaying a lip sync on stage or you might be slaying a dragon somewhere. But the common thread is that you're slaying it. You're brave and you're putting yourself out there and you're representing something that might feel very internal and hidden within. And drag and D&D give you an opportunity to put it out in front of people in a way that is really celebrated.
So given that natural symmetry, is there a history between these two communities, between Dungeons & Dragons and drag?
Surprisingly, very little. There are certainly queer people who play D&D, and there's certainly people who play D&D who love drag. And we've been searching for other people who are bringing these two things together. And it's happened. It's not an impossible thing to do. I think on its face, drag and D&D seem like they're just two completely different worlds because of the stereotypes that are conjured to mind when you think of these things. When you think of D&D, you might think of like on Stranger Things, some kids playing in a basement. And when you think of drag, you think of some wild, extravagant thing in a bar someplace. But ultimately, it's all about imagination, fantasy, and adventure. And we're so excited to brought these performers together at this really exciting, fun intersection.
Tell me more about your performers. How did you choose this specific cast?
So we really lucked out with our cast. They're all local Seattle drag performers. We've got Harlot O'Scara and Butalino Kipple, who are a real-life couple. They've been together for many years, and they do a show called Family Meal once a month at a place called Kremwork here, which is also the same building where we do our live show. And they are very, you could think of them as more experimental drag. They both have, Harlot has a beard and Butaline has a mustache. And, when you go to a Family Meal show, you are definitely going to be surprised and challenged, and you're going to see something kind of strange and goofy and playful and fun. We've also got Arson Nikki, who she likes to try to do more transgressive drag. So there's a real a quality to her drag where you're like, I'm looking at some strange otherworldly creature, and I don't know what exactly I'm seeing, but it's so compelling I can't look away. And then we've got Freya Love, who's another one of our performers, who performs at, I believe Julia's here in Seattle, doing a more traditional kind of drag, where it's a lip sync and crowd work and entertaining people over drinks. But she's also super creative. She, despite doing more traditional drag than our other performers, she's really the wild card of the show. She's very new to D&D, so she came to it completely fresh, and she's definitely the one who surprises and challenges me the most as the DM. She's the one who says, can I use this spell in some way that it has never occurred to anybody else to use this spell? She's a water genasi, which means she has a lot of water based magic. So she's always trying to use her water to like oxidize an enemy or crystallize ice around an enemy. She's using it to float strangely in water, or she's taken on a deity that she worships that's basically Cher. She really like startles us every time we're doing a show. So we've been doing the live show that we called Dungeons and Drag Queens. That was, for an audience at Kremwork and Timber Room here in Seattle. Now, Queens of Adventure is the podcast, so we'll be able to do a more ongoing type of adventure and get those four queens, on a more serial sort of quest. So they'll be able to, instead of just having like a 2-hour live show one-off adventure, we're going to be able to have them doing something a little more ongoing, which, I'm super excited for because they've all worked together. They're colleagues, and they've been doing shows and partnering on live performances for a long time. So it feels like a very natural fit to have them going on a fantasy adventure in the same way that they have been doing drag performance together over the course of many years.
How have the live shows been received? I assume positively, since you're turning it into a podcast.
Yeah, they sell out very fast. We have done 4 so far here in Seattle. The first one we did around PAX. Then we, and it was a huge experiment to be like, is there anything to this? Is this going to work? And we were convinced when we were doing this, like, this is too weird, and we're going to get 5 people there, and they're all going to be our friends who we begged to come. And sure enough, the night of the show, there's literally a line around the block. Then we did another one for Halloween, where they were in a haunted amusement park. We did one for the holidays where they were in a blizzard. We just did another one. It was a mystery set on a cruise ship. And every single time, line around the block, tickets sold out. When we're recording this, we're about to do a live show in San Francisco. That's on the 20th. Once again, it's a big experiment because we're going to a new city. We're going to see if people are into it. We're doing Queens of Adventure live for San Francisco for the first time. And once again, tickets are moving very fast. I think we've only got a few available, and the show's in just a couple days. So, it definitely seems as though there is demand for that, a craving, for LGBT heroes, to, inspire people and, remind people that they're part of a big tribe of queer heroics.
You've mentioned a couple of times that you've done the show around PAX, but not at PAX. Do you bring your show to game conventions?
Well, the show that we're doing in San Francisco, we're going to be doing, it coincides with the Game Developers Conference. And we would love to do more, around, conferences. So, PAX was a great opportunity for us to do our first one. We did our most recent one during, Emerald City Comic Con here in Seattle. And we're looking ahead, on the calendar, to future cons in Los Angeles and New York. And our hope is, now that we've got the basics of it, now that we know that we can do the live show, now that we know that Queens of Adventure, is, it's gonna be fully funded for its first season as a podcast. Now we are very excited about taking it to cons and saying, hello, we have this show. We know how to do it, and we'd like to put it on for you. And people seem to want this. So, it's definitely something that, we want to do more of.
So you're saying the live show will continue even once the podcast launches?
Yeah, we'll see, how much we're able to fit into our schedules because we're biting off a lot here. But, as long as people want to see it, we're going to keep making it. We've got, a lot of recording to do for Queens of Adventure. But, nothing beats the thrill of having a live audience there, laughing along with you and letting you know, how excited they are. We do every time in the live show, whenever I say roll for initiative, that gets a big round of applause. We also have interactive elements with our audience where, the audience, has paddles. Certain people in the audience have paddles that they can hold up to add 1 or subtract 1 from any dice roll. So we always make sure to incorporate our live audiences. And with the podcast, we've hit 3 stretch goals so far, which means that we are going to be doing 3 live streams. And so we're super excited about, having a live online audience watching us play. The queens are going to be in full drag. They're going to be interacting with viewers, who are watching us. It's probably going to be, on Twitch, or it might be YouTube gaming. We haven't really worked out the details on that yet. But, we're just super excited about, having people watching, and playing along and, participating, in the big queer adventure that we're going on.
What happens when you don't have that live audience, though, as the podcast won't? How will the show change as a result?
That's a great question. And it's something that we've been paying really close attention to with the test recordings that we've been doing. Between the live shows, we actually did in between downtime adventures where we had the queens leveling up and going on sort of mini adventures and having a little bit of combat. We've been doing those as sort of sort of practice pilots for the podcast. And so, what we figured out is that it gives them a little more time to, not having the audience there and not having the time limit, gives them a little more time to go wandering and to be like, oh, well, I know that the adventure is, we're being directed into this combat encounter and we've got to get to the end of the show, within 2 hours. But I just saw, like some weird wild animals scurry down a back alley and I'm going to go chase it. And so when we're doing the podcast, it really gives them an opportunity to chase down tangents and also just to riff on each other's comedy. Because ultimately it's a comedy show. It's super funny when you get a bunch of drag queens together, having the microphones in front of them and saying like, just, go on this adventure and do what you want. And it's going to continue week to week. Gives them a lot more time and a lot more breathing room to make fun of each other or to come up with some bizarre solution to a problem that takes more time than we'd be able to do on the show. It gives them a lot more time to just do the like riffing and going off on weird, hilarious tangents, and making references to Drag Race or queer history or just, it's somebody's wig or shoes or whatever. It really opens up a lot of possibilities for the show. We've had in the live show, there's a breakneck pace where they're either, there's one show where they were fighting killer wigs. There was another one where, they were at an amusement park and they had to identify, animals on a carousel that, they had to sit on to bring to life. There was a challenge where they had to vogue. And these are all very visual things. So on the podcast, we're really focusing on weaving a picture and painting a world of fantasy and imagination, for the listeners.
You'll be missing not only the audience from your recording, but also the visual aspect. As you said, drag can be larger than life, and I'm sure a lot of that comes across in the personality and the delivery, but also I'm sure some of it comes across in the visual and the aesthetics as well. How will the show compensate for not having that visual component?
Yeah, it's true, and something we're really aware of. A big part of drag is the look. But that having been said, there's more to drag than just an outfit. With the podcast, we do have some art that we've had. Chad Sell, who's a really celebrated drag illustrator, his work's been featured on Drag Race in the past, doing some visual work for us. But beyond just the look of the outfits, drag is also an attitude. It's a conjuring up, like I was mentioning before, of something a bit more internal and more inward. It's the bravery and the creativity and the fierceness that a lot of people have sort of percolating below the surface. So even when you can't visually see the drag performers, hearing their voices and hearing their attitude and the fun that they're having and the way that they're bouncing off of each other, drag slang for that is a kiki. It's basically having a party where people are just having a gay old time and being goofy and fun and silly, using a lot of drag slang with each other, being very fierce with each other, giving each other what are called reads. Reading somebody is a usually affectionate, gentle insult where, it's basically roasting someone, but in a very sly sort of way. There's a documentary called Paris is Burning that's sort of a foundational text for modern drag, where reading and shade is described as the art of, I don't have to tell you you're ugly because you know you're ugly. And getting that idea across without actually saying the words. It's a very affectionate, joking way of, interacting and teasing each other. So a lot of it is just the persona of the performers. And again, it's something that fits very well on top of D&D, and it's something that fits very well on top of drag. Having a persona that's larger than life and, goofy and big and bold, and isn't necessarily the way that you would talk to people just like walking down the street or going into the office, but really setting your imagination free and your inner hero free to say the things that are just at the back of your mind. It's something that works great in drag and in D&D. So, we've definitely got the attitude there. And then our hope is that, we'll be able to have, art of the adventures and, have some more visual stuff. And like I said, we're doing those live streams. So, people will be able to see us on the live streams as well.
Will the cast be in their outfits even for the audio podcast recording?
That's something that we are figuring out. There'll definitely be for the live shows and definitely for the live streams. I don't think it's going to be exactly, there's definitely not going to be like full glamorous drag when we're just recording the audio. Something that we found from doing these test recordings is that drag queens, it turns out, have really are really skillful at imagination. And as soon as you say, oh, okay, here's where you are, you're in this castle and there are monsters charging at you and you're armed with your weapons. One of our drag queens has her packed weapon is a vibrator. And you've got your stiletto heels and, you're just painting this portrait of where they are with your words. Drag queens are really good at picking up the lead from that and envisioning themselves in that environment. So, what we found is that whether they're in drag or out of drag, they can just snap right into character. It's something that's really fun to watch around the table.
I saw some footage from your second show back in November, and it sounds like it's not just the cast that engages with D&D differently from a different set of players would, but also the adventures themselves are different. For example, I saw a scene where they were discussing cutting a glory hole in a restroom, I think.
Yes.
And that doesn't seem like something that might come up in somebody else's D&D game.
It's true, yeah. We've definitely found an intersection of nerdy D&D RPG references and queer culture references. And it's something that is really rewarding when we can make those two things happen at the same time. So like you said, there was the glory hole based puzzle. There was also a puzzle involving different gay archetypes. So you may be aware that gay men sort of characterize themselves physically into categories that include bear and pup and otter. And so we had a sort of taxonomy of creatures that was part of a puzzle the queens had to solve. There were killer wigs. We had mannequins that came to life that we called mannequeens. So incorporating D&D into incorporating queer culture into the game has been very fun. We also made use of this real life thing called Polari. Polari was a type of slang that was used mostly in queer theater circles in England about 100 years ago. It was a real language that just sort of evolved out of necessity for queer people to talk to each other without attracting the attention of police. And it's where we get words like zhuzh when you talk about like zhuzhing someone's hair, and a lot of other like little gay slang that has survived from Polari. And so we've rolled that into our game, and we call it Draglish, a language that is known to drag queens, that allows them to speak to each other in the same way that you would have, whether a character can speak, an Elvish language or a Dwarvish language. We've created a Draglish language, for our players. It's something that the audiences respond really nicely to, when you hear something that is a reference that not everyone is going to get, but you get, and the people around you get. It's a signal of we're all in this together. We're talking to each other. We're part of the same group. We're all part of the same family, a chosen family, which again is something very queer. It's something that a lot of LGBT people are familiar with, is setting out into the world and forming a logical family that may not be biological, but is people that get each other and support each other. And it's something that we are really happy to see fostered, both at our live shows and with the community that's building around Queens of Adventure, the podcast. And it's something that we're really looking forward to fostering as the project goes on.
So it sounds like James has been busy and that he's not just using off-the-shelf campaigns and modules. He's creating this world.
Absolutely. I am just blown away by the work that James does on these adventures. We work together to create them, but James is really the mastermind he has a ton of experience as a game designer. He's worked at LucasArts and Capcom and Leapfrog, designing games there. And now he's brought that sensibility. He really knows fun. Like, it's amazing, like, how skilled he is at understanding what is enjoyable and fun and what makes for a good game, and how to blend freeform creativity and a little bit of rules and structure in a way that is a pleasure to play and a pleasure to watch. So he's been creating the adventures wholly from scratch, going through the Dungeon Master's Guide and creating enemies and puzzles and environments and settings and situations and scenarios. completely, they're all coming from him with a little bit of input from me. Every now and then, James needs me to explain some queer reference because I've been a LGBT journalist for many years, and it's very much my world. When we first started doing our first adventure, there was a moment during our first live show where one of the queens said that she was gagging, and afterwards James was like, "What does gagging mean?" And so I explained to him that gagging means that you are just thrown, you're taken aback, you're blown away. And it felt very much like when I go to him and I'm like, now how does proficiency work? And I need him to explain some aspect of D&D to me. So, in addition to blending, the queer stuff that I'm a real expert in and the game stuff that James is real expert in, for an audience, blending those things together for people who are watching. It's also something that has, really nicely, brought us together as a couple. We've been together for about 15 years, and it's really helped us, understand each other and understand each other's passions, in a way that even after 15 years, it's been a new way for us to relate to each other and create something together as a couple.
Did you and James have to have a discussion about which one of you would have been the dungeon master?
No, actually. So I'm usually the face of the projects that we work on. James is very behind the scenes. So whether we're doing a video or a podcast or a live performance or whatever it is, generally James is the mastermind who is very good at designing an experience. And then I'm the one who goes out there and smiles at everybody and does the actual hosting of stuff. I'm not 100% sure about this. It's just occurring to me now, but I think I might be more of the charisma-based character while James is optimizing for intelligence.
I'm sure you both have ample quantities of both.
I like to think so. Like I said, I came to D&D very recently and was really pleased by how accessible it is. I'd always thought like, oh, this is not for me. I don't understand it. It's too complicated. And then, I was able to pick it up very fast, thanks in large part to James teaching me, but also because 5th edition of D&D is just super fun and well designed, and easy for people to come to. So, even if somebody has no idea how D&D works, it's very easy to listen to people playing and to pick up what they're doing. People have listened to the Adventure Zone or Harmon Quest. It's very much like a radio play, with occasional numbers being thrown out that you can pay attention to if you want to. And if you're not interested in the stats, that's fine too.
Now, my understanding is that the Dungeons and Drag Queens live show is not also the name of the podcast. The podcast is called Queens of Adventure because you didn't want to necessarily restrict yourself to games that sound like Dungeons and Dragons. Is that right?
Well, yeah. So, Queens of Adventure we settled on, because it really sums up what's going on in the show. They are queens. They're on an adventure, and we're using queens, to mean anyone who unleashes that inner hero. Like I said, it's open to people of all genders, all orientations. It's something that, we feel very strongly is accessible to everybody. Queens of Adventure it felt like the right thing to describe what we're doing.
Now, with the live show, you would do one-off adventures, so you pretty much know the beginning and the end, and you can try to squeeze it into 2 hours. But with a campaign, an ongoing one, like you'll be doing with your podcast, I know from my own experience playing D&D, you can never tell where you're going to end at the end of each session. So how do you know how many episodes of your podcast you're going to need?
Oh boy. I mean, it's something that, we've really been honing in the course of doing the live shows is, just how much of a hand the DM needs to have over the proceedings. And it's something that I've been learning as we go. We definitely are going to be more open-ended with the podcast. But we also, have, we're not just like setting off into this, completely blind and with no idea where we're going. We have things that we know we want the queens to encounter. We have experiences we know we want them to go through. And so my job as the DM is, to give them the freedom to explore and do their thing and be drag queens and be outrageous and ridiculous and silly, but then also bring it back and say, okay, well, we've been making jokes about, this, this wig shop that we've been in for the last 5 minutes. And, now, the mercenaries that you are running from are rounding the corner and coming towards you. So we're going to need to move along. What are you going to do? So, it's just a matter of, as DM, keeping an eye on the clock, keeping an eye on the players to know, like, what is enjoyable for them, thinking through, like, what does the audience want to hear? And basically being a director. That's what I've been learning as DM for our live shows is, I'm sort of a director that's out there on stage with the players as they're playing. So yeah, we have a season 1, kind of roughly mapped out how many episodes we're going to have and what we want them to be doing. But I have absolutely no doubt that the queens will shock and astound and frustrate and confuse and give us all kinds of challenges along the way. I mean, they already, in the live show, they'll, come up with some ludicrous solution to something that just leaves me speechless. In our holiday show, we had Harlot Oscara was fighting a Yeti, and she came up with this incredible move where she climbs the Yeti and uses her stiletto heel as a weapon to jump off of it and does this impressive move, like a backflip onto a tree. And I'm like, there's so much going on here. I don't know how to roll for any of it, but there's no time to stop and look stuff up because we've got an audience of 100 people watching us. So we're just going to roll with it and let's see if we can figure it out. And I think that's actually been the most fun part is when they shock us with something completely unexpected and make life very difficult for me as DM. That's been the time that I've felt intense panic. And also I think that the audience has really enjoyed watching me squirm and solve the problem. I'm throwing problems at them of here's a Yeti. What are you going to do? And then they're throwing problems right back at me. Okay, here's what we're going to do. Figure out how to resolve this roll. Really it's a process of, coming up with problems and solutions and just being in a race to who can come up with the most in the shortest amount of time.
When the show is recorded instead of live, do you think you'll take that opportunity to either look things up in books and manuals or to edit the podcast before it goes live?
There will definitely be a little bit of editing, just to make it a pleasant experience. If somebody drops their dice on the floor, nobody wants to wait around for 15 seconds while someone chases dice. But, I think part of the fun is, that we're just barreling ahead. And, there's absolutely, a play style that, celebrates the, rules lawyering of making sure you're following the rules by the letter. But something that we readily acknowledge is that we know most of the rules and we follow them most of the time. But there are times when that call for some creative problem solving that is going to be more fun and sillier and more extravagant than the by the book solution to something. And I think this is something that Wizards and D&D acknowledges, where they've got rules specifically saying if something's working, if something's fun for the group, go with what's working, what's fun for the group. And what's fun for the group is, making stuff up on the fly and being surprising. So I think there will probably be minimal procedural content for the, by procedural, I mean, the actual, kind of courtroom Robert's Rules of Order, and a lot more of drag queens doing their drag queen thing. Something that Butylene pointed out is that when she's doing a drag show, because she hosts Family Meal, which is the drag show that they do at Kremwork here. Things are always going wrong. Somebody broke a heel. Their lip sync didn't play. They were supposed to throw confetti, but somehow it got stuck in their sleeve. There's supposed to be some fake blood in a number, and the bag of fake blood leaked out all over the stage. There's things that are always going wrong. And, dealing with things going wrong is part of doing drag. Dealing with things going wrong is very much a part of the D&D that we're playing. And, I think part of the pleasure of that is the acknowledgement that okay, things are going to go wrong. Things are going to get screwed up. And you know what? It's okay because we're all in it together and we're going to solve some problems together.
Speaking of things going wrong, in your Kickstarter FAQ, you write, "We want to create a show that is friendly and inclusive for people of any gender identity, gender expression, or sexual orientation. We may make mistakes, but we will listen to feedback and make changes to be as welcoming as we can." End quote. What sort of mistakes have you made or are you anticipating?
Oh, that's a good question. I feel pretty good that I don't think we've made I don't think the live show that we've done has done anything to make people feel unwelcome. That having been said, I recognize that when talking about gender and orientation, it can be a very sensitive subject for a lot of people, and justifiably so. I think that's as it should be. It's something that's very important to a lot of people. And when something's important, and language is important and terminology is important, there's always a possibility that you're going to step on some thin ice that you didn't know was there. To my knowledge, I don't think I'm trying to remember if we've done that at all in the live show. And I don't think we have, fortunately. We've been very sensitive about, making an experience that everyone feels welcome in. But the possibility is always there that, we're accidentally going to use a wrong pronoun, or that we will, lean on a trope that is offensive in some way that we weren't aware of. And what's important to us is that we have an open mind if someone points out that we've made a mistake, or points out that we've done something to alienate people, or to just give people a bummer feeling, because that's not something we want to do. We want to listen to feedback and hear if that's happened. We want to hear from listeners about what would make them feel comfortable and what would help them have a good time listening to the show. Because again, we're ultimately doing this to have a good time and to enjoy each other's company. It's something that I've heard other podcasts do very nicely. It's something that I've seen other performers do very well. I have a lot of respect, for example, for another local Seattle drag queen, Ben de la Creme. She's been speaking really eloquently about her belief that drag is for everybody, and her respect for a lot of the transgender queens that have appeared on Drag Race. I just saw a live show with Jinx Monsoon, who is another Seattle drag queen, who's had, she's really been a pioneer when it comes to, using pronouns that affirm someone's gender. So I want to pay attention to the language that people use to be inclusive and welcoming to all. And if we do at some point make a mistake and make someone feel bad, we want to make sure that we're aware of that, and that we are effectively apologizing and improving. It's from having been a queer journalist for many years, I know it's always something that can happen. You can always walk into some terminology that people don't want to hear, because language changes, and the terms that we use now and the way that we talk about things now is very different from how it might have been 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I had no idea. I personally, as a queer journalist, I really was not sensitive to pronouns. At most I would have said, referred to someone's preferred pronoun, not really thinking through, well, it's really not a preference. It's something that affirms their actual gender. So it's something that I've had to learn and get better at. It's something that I've seen other, drag queens learn and get better at, welcoming people of different, genders and orientations into shows. And so, the more drag opens up to more people, the more people who can play in that space and have a good time, the better.
Well, I was going to close by asking what your goal is for this podcast beyond just entertaining people, which itself is worthwhile. What else do you hope will happen by merging these two communities and showing them off to the world? It sounds like you sort of just answered that.
Well, yeah, with a lot of the work that I do, my goal is just connecting people and bringing people together in a way that they can have a good time. Ultimately, the goal of the show is let's have fun. Let's connect with each other. Let's understand each other. Let's go on an adventure together. We could see from our sold out shows here in Seattle that there is this powerful craving for queer D&D. There are simply not enough LGBTQ heroes out there. So we want to have this podcast as essentially a beacon, a safe place, a haven for folks who want to see queer heroes going out into the world, and who can, we want people who are listening to feel like they're part of that family, that big extended family of D&D geeks and drag geeks and people who are passionate about playing a game and performing. We want everybody to feel like there's a place where they're welcome, and where those different interests can overlap. And I think that's something that we've done in a way that I'm really proud of with the show. And I'm just really excited to get the podcast going.
Well, I'm really excited to listen to it, and I'm so glad that you're one of those people who is pushing for that more inclusive world and are creating the channels and the media that enable it to happen. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for your interest in it. It's something like, I know for you, like not knowing anything about drag, we definitely want to make this a show that someone who doesn't know about drag or doesn't know about D&D, it's something that you could just walk right into and be welcome right off the bat.
I know only slightly more about D&D. The last time I played was 17 years ago, and it was a D&D 2nd edition. I was playing a level half-elf thief.
Okay. There've been a lot of, there's been a lot of changes, but also there's a lot that's still very similar. James and I were just watching the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon from the 80s.
Oh my God, I love that show so much.
It is so campy. I mean, I just use the word campy to describe it, which is, a word that often is used to describe drag. But, even there's Tiamat is in the first episode. You've got Beholders in the second episode. You've got your acrobats and your thieves and your wizards. There's a lot that's very familiar about it. So, the rules may have changed a little bit since 1980 something, but the spirit of it, of we're going to go and have an adventure and use our imaginations. I mean, that's always going to be just baked into the DNA of the game.
So that's what you're going to do, is you're going to advertise to people of our age demographic, and you're going to say, if you grew up watching the Saturday morning cartoon, you'll love Queens of Adventure.
I hope so. I hope the people who grew up with the cartoon love it. I hope the people who love Drag Race love it. I hope the people who are playing D&D for the first time now love it. With 5th edition, there's a lot of people coming to the game very fresh, like me. I was just listening to a thing about how, it's very big in Hollywood right now. Like Joe Manganiello is a big D&D player. Vin Diesel plays a lot of D&D. Of course, you've got folks like Felicia Day who are icons of geeky queerness, with, or at least queer friendliness. So seeing how many people are, I don't want to say closeted, but seeing how many people you might not expect, are playing a role-playing game, are just deeply invested in, is something that really warms my heart.
I was wondering how you've acclimated yourself into this culture of D&D that you're fairly new to. For example, do you watch Felicia Day and Will Wheaton YouTube shows? Do you read Knights of the Dinner Table? What do you do?
Yeah, so a couple things. I'm just voraciously reading through the books right now. I'm reading through Tales of the Yawning Portal, Tales from the Yawning Portal, just to get a little better about understanding what makes for a good adventure. Of course, I listen to the Dragon Talk podcast that Greg Tito does at Wizards. Matt Colville has a really fantastic series of YouTube videos that's, teaching people how to be a good DM. There's the Force Grey series that is very fun to watch. So, the Adventure Zone has been a huge inspiration for us. Listening to, people who have a great chemistry with each other. That's, a family. It's brothers and their dad playing D&D. Listening to them play and watching Harmon Quest, where you've got a bunch of comedians sitting around a table, telling a story and being funny, and striking that perfect balance between just jokes, but also, you guys, we have an adventure to go on, so it can't just be constant jokes all the time. So those are some of my influences. There's also a great podcast that's based here in Seattle called D20 Dames, that's really lovely and a really beautiful, gentle approach to role-playing games. It's a cast of all women who are going on an adventure. I love listening to that show. And there's more out there than I can possibly consume. So I've just been gobbling it down wherever I can find it.
And Queens of Adventure encapsulates and draws from the best of all of these media.
That's my hope. That we can learn from what other people are doing and build on it, and hopefully they'll like what we're doing and they'll incorporate. I mean, my dream is for the queer content that we're putting into Queens of Adventure to see that reflected in other shows, for that to have a ripple effect out into other D&D, and for people to, incorporate mana queens, or we've got some recurring NPCs. We've got one a gnome that we've named Nomi Malone, which is a reference to Showgirls, the main character in the movie Showgirls. I'd love to see some more queer references being picked up by other D&D groups. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we can have as much of an impact on other people as they've had on us.
And remind everybody where they can find Queens of Adventure to make all this happen.
Yeah, it's at queensofadventure.com. Right now that's pointing towards the Kickstarter, where you can back the first season. We've funded the base of the first season, so now we're reaching for some stretch goals. Those are some live streams with the queens, and then also it'd be a dream come true if we can reach this point of hiring some artists to do a fully illustrated adventure that people can download and play themselves. I'm so excited for that. We're also working with a composer named Major Scales, who is a composer here in Seattle who works with Jinx Monsoon and does a lot of cabaret type music. So we're hoping that we can get to a fundraising point where we can hire him to do an original theme song for the podcast. So queensofadventure.com is the Kickstarter. Oh, and of course we've got some really fabulous rewards for backers too. It's very important to us that we incorporate the audience. So backers can vote on game elements, so they can have a big impact on the game. Backers can name elements of the world that we're setting up. There's a gorgeous postcard that we're printing on. It's like shiny foil with a beautiful drag queen on it that we're mailing out to backers. People can get bonus episodes of the podcast for backing and sponsor episodes or sponsor a whole season. So we're really excited about using those backer rewards to draw more of the audience into the experience, because it's not just us talking to listeners. We really want listeners to feel like they're a part of the adventure as well.
Excellent. I'll include links to all of those in the show notes.
Fantastic.
Matt, it has been such a delight to have you back on the podcast again. I hope next time maybe you'll bring James with you.
We'll see. He's a very mysterious figure. He's shadowy and unknowable, but you can see him lurking in the background at some of our live shows.
Well, I would certainly hate to dispel that mysteriousness, so I will just channel him through you.
Okay, good.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt. Have a good day.
Thanks. You too. Talk to you later.
This has been Polygamer, a GameBits production. Find more episodes, read our blog, or send feedback at polygamer.net.